platform. I will now invite the Minister to the podium to commence with today's media briefing. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tsakani, and good morning to everyone. And once more, thank you very much to members of the media for making time to join us at this media briefing. I think it's particularly helpful because it helps us to convey the message to the general public, the various households in the country, and also to business and potential investors, but also provides a degree of transparency on the work that we're doing. Remember that we had made a commitment that our work will be characterized by transparency, candidness, and robustness. So this is in keeping with the promise that we have made. I also want to really say that we have seen an exceptional run of no load shedding for a considerable period of time. I think today marks 40 days without interruption of power supply. And I really want to pause here and just express my most sincere appreciation on behalf of the 32 for the work that they are doing, the diligent commitment, ensuring that they do everything possible to address the challenge of load shedding. Of course, an argument can be made that this is what is expected of them. Yes, it is expected of them, but I'm sure you know that we're moving from an exceptionally difficult situation. And a lot of pundits had suggested that the kind of run that we are experiencing will not be possible in the current calendar year. It's something that can only be experienced in starting 2025. But as a result of the work that the team has done, some of which I'll be sharing with you, we are beginning to see the kind of improvements that we are seeing. And then the other part to make is Eskom delivered to the country the winter outlook, as is the custom. Eskom does on 2 occasions in a year, do what they call the summer outlook and also do what they call the winter outlook. Essentially generating 3 scenarios that they project going into the future. The first scenario is an optimistic scenario. Then there's a likely or plausible scenario, or if you like, the middle scenario and the worst case scenario. They delivered this winter plan on the 26th of April and generated a number of scenarios. The biggest takeaway for me out of that the winter outlook is a confirmation that there's a structural improvement in relation to generation in the country. What do I mean by that? If you are to juxtapose or compare the winter outlook of 2023 vis-a-vis the winter outlook of 2024 as presented by Eskom on the 26th of April, the one thing that sticks out for me is the following, is that the base case scenario of 2023 suggested that if we lose the total capacity of about 15,000 megawatts, so what we call the unplanned capacity loss factor, which talks to 2 key variables really, about the reliability of the units and also the efficiency of the units. In 2023, that base case scenario assumed that we're going to lose about 15,000 megawatts. Fast forward a year later, Eskom is generating a winter outlook, but now they've recalibrated the base case scenario. And that base case scenario is that is 14,000 megawatts. So essentially Eskom, by its own admission, accepts that the kind of improvement that we've seen is so enduring that we can say to the country that we have clawed back 1,000 megawatts compared to the same period the previous calendar year. So that's the first structural change. And the second structural change has to do with, if you like, your PMPs. So of course, as a result of the aggressive rollout of solar PV by both industry and the households, on the back of incentives provided for by National Treasury, the kind of reforms that have been introduced, you are seeing that there's greater numbers of households and industry that are taking up the opportunity to roll out solar PV behind the meter interventions. And of course, we can say part of it is triggered by the unreliability of the grid. You are exceptionally correct, but also a significant part of it is as a result of these incentives. And of course, it helps us to ensure that the energy mix draws from a number of fuel sources. And you are likely going to see that your peak either tapers or is likely going to come down. I mean, if you compare apples to apples. So that's for me, those are the key structural changes. And those structural changes for me communicates a very important message. What is that important message? Is that we are making strides in the delivery of the Energy Action Plan as unveiled by President Ramokgopa in July of 2022. I'm making this point because, as you can imagine, we're in the silly season. There's going to be a number of extrapolations, interpretations of what is before us, whether there's a correlation of this improvement to the elections. And my answer is simple, is that when I was appointed and given this assignment, I'd entered into a pact with the country to say that you are going to receive a weekly or bi-weekly updates on the performance that we are making. Even during the most difficult times, we're able to share with you the kind of work that we are doing. And we had made the point even previously that on the back of the fiscal support received from National Treasury, Eskom has been able to invest a significant proportion of that into planned maintenance. And that's why when we went into December of 2020, transitioning into January of 2024, we experienced about 18% of the total generating capacity was taken out for planned maintenance. In megawatt terms, about 9,000 megawatts. Unprecedented in the past 3 years as a result of this fiscal support, but also the Eskom following philosophy maintenance as a result of the leadership provided by the board, led by Dr. Mteto, the executive management team, led by Mr. Marokane, and of course, Mr. Beki Numalo, who's on the generation side, together with the many men and women who are committed to the resolution of this problem, who are located at the various power stations. So I think it's important that there has to be some degree of appreciation that these concerted efforts are beginning to bear fruits. And that's why we can say today, as I stand before you, that we are experiencing a situation where we have had 40 days of consecutive no load shedding. Of course, we want to get to a stage where it is 3 months, 6 months, is a year. But the point I always make all the time is that it's one day after the other. We accumulate the days, we'll accumulate the months, we'll accumulate the quarters, we'll get to a year, and suddenly over time, we'll get into energy security. What has delivered this in numbers terms? So remember that our biggest enemy, where we are from an Eskom point of view, remember that the Energy Action Plan has got 5 outcomes, but just on the Eskom one, which is outcome number 1, of ensuring that we fix Eskom. Really, our biggest enemy is to ensure that we address the issue of the units failing, what in technical speak they refer to as unplanned capacity loss factor. So this, like I said before, it talks to the reliability of the units just failing on their own, and or issue the efficiency of the units not giving us the megawatts that we want. Although they are not failing, they are not going off the grid, but they are not performing at the levels that we want. So what is the story here? Is that if you look at the period of May 2023, so I'm comparing the same period last year and the same period today, so that you can have the benefit of 12 months of the movement of the trend line. Remember, time is the trend line. Are we moving in the right direction? Is this a momentary success, or this communicates to the possibility of a success being sustained over a period of time and accepting that there will be instances of momentary setbacks. When we experience those setbacks, it should not be lost on us, the fact that we are moving in the right direction. So what is the experience? Is that the same period in May, our unplanned capacity loss factor, the amount of megawatts that we lost, they moved from 16,800 megawatts to about 18,000 megawatts. So in May last year, this time, we're sitting at the losses of 18,196 megawatts. So what is the situation now as I stand before you? And I'll show you the trend line of a week-by-week basis. We have been by Sunday, the 5th of May, this number was sitting at 11,036 megawatts. So essentially, we've been able to recover as a result of this concerted effort by these distinguished men and women, starting with the board and the lowest placed member of the ESCOM team. We're able to bring back 7,000 megawatts. That's significant. And that's what accounts for what I call the structural shift. It's as a result of that. And the point I'm making is that this recovery and the clawing back of the 7,000 megawatts, it's something that has been experienced over a period of time, in this instance, over a 24-month period. And in fact, all indications suggest that we will continue to improve on this number. But I'm stating you what essentially are the facts that we have recorded without necessarily making assumptions and projections going into the future. But the point I'm making is that there is no correlation between this performance and the date of the 29th of May. When the team were making these efforts, when we ramped up plant maintenance in December and January, little did we know that there will be a big date with the ballots by all freedom-loving South Africans on the 29th of May. So this is not staged. This is not managed. This is an orchestrated effort and an engineering feat by the team at ESCOM. And what we know is that the UCF is tracking at about 29% as at April of 2024, as opposed to 34% of April 2023. So we have recovered in percentage terms 5 percentage points over a period of the same period in April and the comparable period this year in April. So again, you don't earn and recover that 5 percentage points suddenly because a date of an election has been announced. It's as a result of a process mapping in engineering terms, the stabilization of management, ensuring that we use and deploy this fiscal injection received from National Treasury, identifying candidate stations that can give us the best returns in the shortest possible space of time, what we call the Pareto principle. And all of these things is yielding the results that are pointing us in the right direction. And the fact that the ending of load shedding is within touching distance. We are not yet there. I will not make the false claim that we are there, but we are getting there even much quicker than we had anticipated. So I think it's important that to indicate that from the 26th of April 2024, have reduced 500 we had experienced some time moving in the right direction. So when you address this unplanned capacity loss and you return the units, all of these things then contributes to what we call the energy availability factor, the amount of megawatts that are available to the grid relative to what is installed. And we express that in percentage terms. We call it the energy availability factor. What is the experience? The EAF has been above 60% since the 29th of April. And it reached proportions of about 65.5%. And I think the other Saturday were even close to 66%. This is a resounding success. Resounding in many ways. The first one is that we know that we can achieve it with this fleet of generating units at ESCOM. So previously we are advised that it's not possible with the rapid aging of this unit for you to be even making a claim that you can achieve the EAF of 65%. And in fact, the team has done this. This is not magic. The team has always known that it's possible for us to be able to achieve this. And that's quietly, engineering stealth, they've been able to deliver this. And what is the point? The point is that we know it can be achieved. And what we want to show the country is that we can even exceed these numbers. Of course, you know that the board has set a target of about 70% by 2025. And the team will work very hard to get to that number and even surpass it. And of course, like I said, additional measures are being introduced to ensure that we are able to address this. And then it also does show in some of these stations, because what I give is an aggregate picture, is a net picture of the performance these stations put together, and then you get to this percentage of the total performance of the fleet. But there are 7 stations that are showing us that consistently they are above 60% of EAF. And in fact, they've been 60%, above 60% of EAF year to date. Remember that the total performance is the sum total of the individual contributions of the various power stations. And that's why it's important that we granularize, if you like, this assessment. The intensive interrogation of the performance of the fleet is a function of the degree of the performance, not just of a particular station, but of a specific generation unit at that particular station. That's the level of granularity that the team is attaching to this exercise. So the picking, they are performing. And the picking, they're important because at the time when we need them, they must be available. So you can say, but it's a counterproductive measure. But remember, picking constitutes part of the total fleet of Eskom. When I say picking, I'm talking about Horiko and Ankerlet, those power stations that gets to be called upon when the system is experiencing significant strain, generation is significantly lower than demand. We want to close the gap so that we're able to either eliminate load shedding and or we're able to reduce the intensity of load shedding. And of course, that's where you ban a diesel. I'll come to the diesel numbers so that there's a better appreciation that what carries us is not the diesel. It's not the picking plants. What carries us is really the backbone of Eskom, is these power stations. Kusile, for an example, was one of the 6 power stations that we have identified for intervention. Of course, as a result of unit 1, 2, 3 having failed as a result of the challenges with regards to emissions, the flue gas desulfurization unit. I'm happy to say that Kusile has graduated from that cluster of 6 power stations that required interventions as a result of the concerted effort of these men and women. Didn't require any assistance from outside with regards to retaining this unit. Is the qualified and competent engineers that are sitting at Eskom. And the point I want to convey to the country, there is no better qualified engineers to deal with these units than those that are found in Eskom. And that's why I want to address the people issues. Once there's a degree of stability, the leadership that is provided by the board, thanks to the collective of the board led by Dr. Mteto, the leadership of Mr. Marukan, and before that, Caleb and Mr. Ngumano, you see that there's this stability and the team is exerting itself. And these engineers, these gems that we have in Eskom are able to deliver these numbers. I want to emphasize to the country that is these men and women at Eskom. There'll always be bad apples, those will be dealt with. Significant minority that are undermining, if you like, this national icon that is Eskom. But the aggregate, the critical mass of the people of Eskom are committed to the resolution of this problem. So we have seen that Kusile, Matimba, Majuba, Letabo, Matla, and Midupi are indeed carrying us. And indeed, we are working on others. Kendall, I was told just the other day, was able to run about 6 units. For the first time in a long time, about 1 or 2 of those units had been out on long planned maintenance. They are returning, they are giving us the megawatts that we want as a result of an orchestrated strategy that was conceived on the back of the Energy Action Plan and the introduction of this new board, articulating what is the recovery path, and all of those things are coming together to deliver the kind of results that the country is experiencing. What is the performance of the EAF year to date? We're sitting at about 58.99%, if you like 59%. We're just shy of 60%. We're not where we want to be. Remember, we had wanted to be here in the last financial year, but we are there, we are close. We are able to see that the trend line is such that we are going to surpass this performance. It's going in the right direction, and we really want to congratulate the team. I want to say to the country that there has not been any Eskom open cycle gas turbine that have been used as of the 1st of May 2024. So we're not supported by diesel. These machines are running on their own. And I'll see it will reveal itself in the numbers, in both the rand value that has been spent and also the megawatts that have been generated out of this. I'm making this point so that I'm able to dispel the myth, the insinuation that Eskom is buying itself out of the load shedding situation as a result of political pressure exerted on them by an incumbent government that wants to perform better come the 29th of May. I've made the following point. One, it will be disrespectful for me to pick up a call and say, Tamteto, please keep the lights on for the interest of the incumbent party. He will not do it, by the way. And I will not even pick up the phone. Because we have agreed on this orchestrated plan. We are going to sit on this plan. We accepted that the plan had inherent risks. Remember, I stood before the country some few months ago when we were at stage 6. I said to the country, we know what we are doing. Please be patient with us. And I really want to say thank you to the many South Africans who have been patient. I know that you are aggrieved as a result of load shedding. There's nothing to be celebrated with 40 days. We don't need load shedding at all. The point I'm making reference to the 40 days is to show that we are going the right direction. I stood here, I said we are stage 6, short-term pain, long-term gain. We know what we are doing. Please bear with us. We know what we are going through. We are beginning to see those results. Mr. Marokane and Becky and the team and the people at Eskom will not do anything that in engineering terms that is going to harm the life of these units or put at risk the lives of men and women who are working at these power stations because there's some date of the 29th of May. It will not happen. And that's why I've been consistent in saying that we are going to do things by the book. We'll not be experienced. We'll keep to the parameters, engineering parameters, but we'll do everything possible to ensure that we accelerate the work that we're doing. And guess what? All of these things is coming together. So I think it's important that we spend a bit of time just to explain that there is no relationship. Of course, there's also we do a juxtaposition of essentially what has been the daily performance of EAF. So the point I'm making here, you can see that the EAF on a consistent basis, when you compare the days in April, the days in May were higher than where we were the last time. And remember the last time, what also carried that EAF in April of 2023 is that we're still burning the diesel and still experiencing load shedding. What is the situation now? I told you that there's periods starting 1st of May, we have not been burning the diesel. Considerable part of April, we've been burning significantly lower amount of diesel, and still we don't have load shedding. So it's important. The last time we were burning this diesel, but we had load shedding. This time, significant periods we are not burning diesel, you don't have load shedding. The only answer can be found in the fact that these machines are performing better, and these machines are not performing better out of some unknown mysterious act. It's as a result of the work of the men and women at Eskom. And for that, you don't congratulate a fish for swimming, but it's important that when you have turned the corner, you appreciate that you have turned the corner, and you urge them to continue to do more, to deliver on the expectations of the country. It's not elevated levels of expectation to say that the lights must be on 24/7, 365 days a year. It's a normal delivery. That's what is expected. But coming from where we're at, we're showing that we're moving in the right direction. Again, what we attempt to do is to also isolate these power stations. Like I've told you about these power stations that are carrying us out of this situation. There are others that are still lagging behind, like Tutuka. And I'm confident you'll see in the next 3 to 4 months that Tutuka will come to the party. The investments that we're making there, and I'm not talking monetary investments only. I'm talking about people investments. I'm talking about stability. I'm talking about certainty going into the future. They are going to bear fruit. And once these workhorses of ESCOM come back like Tutuka, the situation improves and improves for the better. And we are going to get to a situation where we can say with degree of confidence that load shedding is behind us. We are not yet there. We are waiting for these machines to come. But we are tracking also the unplanned capacity loss factor. So you can see the Kusile one. When you use the timeline from October of 2022, that's an important timeline because that's when this board took over and agreed on this plan. And that's why it's important. They agreed on this plan 2 years ago, or if you like, 18 months ago, not knowing that there will be a date of the 29th of May. And they executed in terms of this plan. And the president went further and said, I'll help you to execute by appointing a minister in the presidency responsible for electricity to work with you to deliver on this mandate. As we referred to a project manager, we welcome that. It is the project manager that is helping to deliver this. That's why I say we are celebrating. What bothers us is not the titles, it's not how you are perceived, it's not what the people say, those who are naysayers who don't believe. It's our ability to execute against the plan and explain ourselves to the majority of the country, the work that we're doing. Kusile, that unplanned capacity loss factor, the rate at which these units were failing at Kusile, they were unreliable, they were not efficient. We have seen an improvement of 51%. Majuba, 42%. Matla, 25%. Significant. And I can go on and on with the other stations. And I have accepted there are those stations that have not met the target, but we are doing everything possible to ensure that they are able to carry and we are able to address this situation going into the future. The numbers are important. So what we know for April of 2023 is that we banned diesel. Just April of 2023, we banned 2.3 billion rands of diesel. And out of that, we extracted 344 gigawatts hour of energy. So this year, 2024, April, is 583 million. So 2.3 billion last year, just the month of April. This year is 583. And that's why it's important that we are able to dispel this thing, that indeed we are using diesel to sustain ourselves. And what is it that we got from the IPP? Remember, it's Horika and Ankerlech. Then we've got the diesel and Avon. Last year, it was 805 million rands for the month of April. 126 gigawatt hour of electricity. This year, it's 568. In total, for the month of April, just on the peaking, the morning and evening, 1.1 billion. Last year, 3.1 billion. A third of what we spent last year. And I said that with this performance we are seeing in May, from the 1st of May to today, we are not burning that diesel. You are going to find that when I come back and we show you the comparable period of May, the trend line is going down. So I think it's important that we have that appreciation. I know that in the public domain, there were some political actors, they either chose to misread or did not understand that when we say financially, we really were talking about just the month of April. But I don't think that they misread. I think they genuinely didn't understand. And that's why we use this platform, just to clarify so that people can consume it better. I genuinely think that in my language, you don't have to be in a classroom to be educated. We'll use this platform So ke batho ba bo rena, Modimo a ba tshwarele. So we are resolving this question. That's the point I'm making, to ensure that we address this. So it is found in the numbers. And I really invite these actors, if you want to understand this much, much deeper, because this is it's a media state update, we don't have an opportunity to go deeper and receive a lot of these questions. ESCOM will avail itself outside the minister, just to clarify to you, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? I think the biggest danger in life is not knowing that you don't know. And the sooner you know that you don't know, the more you go out and ask to be assisted. So what's the point? The message I'm conveying, a third of what was spent in April last year, and still we had load shedding. A third of that is spent this year, and we don't have load shedding. And I want to suggest to you that the period of May will even be significantly better. And then as I conclude, we are tracing the 2 weeks. So the capacity available, you can see by the last week of April, that is sitting at about 29,000 megawatts. Now look at the period, the 29th of May to the 29th of April, to the 9th of, to the 3rd of May. That average is sitting at 30,000 megawatts. And this is against a baseline of 27,000 megawatts of the comparable period in May of 2023. So there's an additional 3,000 megawatts. But don't read that on its own. Read it together with the planned outages. The planned outages in May, the baseline was at 3,000. Now it's at 5,500. So we've taken more out, but we still have more in. So the net is about 5,000 if you use those two indicators. It gets more exciting. If you look at the unplanned capacity loss factor, we had been losing the May period about 18,000 megawatts. Now it was averaging the last weeks of April 14,000, and now we're at 12,000 megawatts. This is the kind of improvement that I'm referring to. And the kind of that improvement, we see it also in the management. The fact that the outage slips are beginning to come down. The outage slips means you make a commitment that I'll return these units by this day. When you fail to meet that target that you have set for yourself, you meet it later. You deliver it later than that target. You say you are out. It's an outage slip. It's a function of management. It's a function of planning. And thanks to the stability that the board had introduced, we are seeing the kind of changes that we are seeing. And I think it's important also, this point that I refer to as a structural change. So you can see that going into May, I'm sure we'll see it better and better going deeper into May. You'll see that the demand, the PM peak demand, was about 31,000 megawatts, was still at 27,000. And of course, this number is likely going to go up as we go deeper into May. But you are likely going to see that it's going to be lower than the 31,135 megawatts of peak PM demand. Why is that so? That is so because industry and households have begun to roll out rooftop solar solutions on the back of these incentives, but also just a general appreciation by households that you need something more reliable. You need to be less reliant on the grid. You have to make interventions behind the meter. And of course, we are expecting clearer skies during winter. So we expect that a lot of this demand, especially during the day, 11 to about 4 during the day, for households that have rolled out in industry, they'll be drawing out that from solar. And that's a better problem to have. I'm saying a better problem to have because when your demand plummets, it's a function of a delta. It deals a blow to your revenue earning capacity. The second one is that you'll be producing considerably more than what you are consuming. It's a better problem to have. We'd rather sit with that problem than the current problem. And that's why we'll move into that area. And that one can be resolved by technology intervention. So I thought that it's important that we spend a bit of time just to say that what we're seeing now is not an accident. It's orchestrated. It is planned over a period starting October 2022 by the board on the back of the Energy Action Plan. So when Mr. President Ramokgopa introduced this plan, which was co-created, co-sponsored by private sector, by industry, business, and community, it's beginning to yield the fruits. And when they put it together, they didn't know of this date that the people have with the ballot on the 29th. So it's important that we are appreciative of that. And I'm making the point, we're not out of the woods yet. We need to accelerate new generation capacity. We need to aggressively roll out that solar PV. We need to focus on that baseload. And that's why just the other day, on Friday, together with the leadership of ESCOM, members of the board, the management led by the CEO himself, Mr. Marokani, we descended to KZN. We're at Richards Bay, accelerating that gas to power project, the 3,000 megawatts that can be derived out of Richards Bay. It's important for energy sovereignty. So we're not just reliant on what the installed fleet, we need new generation capacity. And that's why ourselves, working with the Richards Bay IDZ, working with the provincial government, working with the municipality of Mhlathuze, ESCOM and Transnet were part of those conversations. We have pulled all of these actors together under the stewardship of ESCOM, a single technical team, to ensure that we advance the delivery of this 3,000 megawatts so that we get closer to conditions of energy security. Thanks, Eti.
Thank you very much, Minister, for this update and the insights. Indeed, most importantly, thank you very much for all the regular media briefings, because they do indeed chronicle the blow-by-blow journey that it has been towards where we currently are. And with that, colleagues, in the spirit of transparency and being open and accountability, we'll now open the floor to questions from members of the media. We will start with those who are joining us in the room. By a show of hands, please do feel free to seek clarity. And then we'll then follow with questions that have been shared online. Are there any hands in the room? We've got Hloni. Any other? Okay, but Tabile, after Hloni, you will then take us through the questions that have been shared on the online platform.
Thank you, TK Minister. Thank you for going from the ENCA. Maybe just for clarity, you did mention the players that were playing, I guess, over the weekend, especially around the diesel budget and what has been spent. You mentioned it now, but can you repeat for clarity again? And it's something that you, I think, did mention last week as well. The diesel budget for 2024, 2025, please. Yeah, and just how much we've used so far. And then the other question is just maybe a comment on the skepticism that we still face, even though we have had these 40 days without electricity. My other question is, are you surprised? I know it's a bit of a separate question, but are you surprised by the difficulties that some municipalities are facing still supplying electricity? So as much as we don't have load shedding, but there's still, maybe not lots, but there are still people that are experiencing outages for periods of a time, sometimes weeks, like 2 weeks at a time, a week at a time, a few days at a time, and it's an inconvenience to people financially from a security point of view. So just a surprise that municipalities are still struggling with that sort of thing, even though we haven't had this period of the share.
Thank you, Hloni. Just one more time, any other hands in the room before we go to our online platforms? Ratabile, please take us through the questions.
Thank you, Sakani. I have 9 questions here. The first is from Ramokgopa, representing independent media. Why have power imports fallen from 981 gigawatt hour in January to 822 gigawatt hour in March? Second question is, why has the average difference in megawatts between the daily low and high demand in April? Third question from Homo is, what was the open cycle gas turbines usage in April in terms of diesel and load factor. Last question from him is, what is the morale of ESCOM employees now? Another question is from Lamis Omaji, representing List 24. Is there any update on the financing mechanism of public-private partnership model to be used for grid expansion? Will it be made public before the elections? We have two more questions from also William Hall, representing Network 24. With regards to the expansion of the transmission grid, what progress has been made and what key milestones lie ahead that have to be achieved? Second question from William is, what are the official EAF targets that have been committed to at each date? And are there any consequence management measures in place if these targets are not met? That is all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Batabile. I think Helmo's second question was addressed by the minister, but we'll get responses. We'll start with Mr. Erickson Makam, and then he'll be followed by the minister. Thanks.
Hi, good morning, colleagues, and thanks for giving me an opportunity to respond to some of the questions. In terms of the diesel budget, I think when one looks at the media outlook, the briefing that we did on the 26th, we confirmed that the budget for ESCOM for this financial year is 22 billion rand. When one looks at the consumption year to date, in terms of costs, I think as shown by the minister, for April, it's 1.151 billion. And if you look at May, for May, just in the last week, ESCOM has not used any diesel. And in terms of IPPs, it was just 2 million rand that was used. Helmut, in terms of your questions with the imports, unfortunately, I don't have a response. I will have to get that. And then in terms of diesel, I think the question is clearly stated on the slides for April specifically. I think because April was a complete month, the minister, I think used the opportunity to actually highlight the costs, and the total is 1151. Minister, I think those are the questions I've taken on myself. In terms of the EAF target, what we've committed to is, as per the board approved plan, it's 65, and that's what ESCOM's actually targeted to achieve. And as we move into next year, it's 70%. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think also in the last presentation, I did indicate that I think the load factor was at about 5.97% in relation to the OCGT. And this is relative to what was an average of about 17% historically. So, Hloni, those are the numbers. So for April of 2023, although date says financial year 24, it runs from the beginning of April to end of March. So what that number I'm showing you there, for April of 2023, we had spent 2.3 billion rands, translating into 344 other gigawatts hours. That's from ESCOM side. And then for this year, what it's there saying financial year 25, really, it starts with the month of April now. So we spent 583. So 583 million compared to the 2.3 billion rand. So in total, when you include the IPPs for last year, April, we spent 3.135 billion. And this April, the whole month, it's a complete month, we spent 1.15 billion, a third of what we had spent. And in fact, also, it's important to note there that even with that 2/3 lower, you still didn't have load shedding. And then on your other question, I mean, in my previous life, led by Minister Delil, as the head of infrastructure and investments in the presidency, we generated an infrastructure plan 2050. And in there, we caution that if there's continued underinvestment or no investment in the distribution infrastructure by municipalities, you are likely going to run into a major problem of this infrastructure collapsing. And this is like 18 months ago when we generated this. And our projection was that you are going to start to see that happening in large measure by 2025. It has come much earlier than anticipated. So everywhere where I go, you have communities that suggest that they haven't had electricity for a considerable period of time. Over the weekend, doing my other business as part of the season we're in, I was in Deep Kloof, Pimville, I'm sorry. I was told that the people, they haven't had electricity since November of last year, a particular area. And it's as a result of the failure of that infrastructure. I was in KZN again 2 weeks ago in eThekwini, the same problem. We're going to Mhlatuzi, the same problem. We've been to a number of municipalities in Northwest, the same problem. So what's the next front that is going to hit us significantly? It has already started, but a new front is open. A new flank is open, and that is the collapse of municipal distribution infrastructure. It's happening at the rate much faster than some of us had anticipated. And of course, we know that a lot of these municipalities are liquid. They are not in a position to meet the financial obligations as a result of an eroding revenue base. I think that the situation is going to become acute. And in fact, one of the things that we had been raising is that we must find a financing dispensation for this infrastructure. You are finding that there's communities from across the length and breadth of the country that are raising these issues, and municipalities are inundated and they don't have the financial muscle to respond to this. And you also find it in the big metros. So it's not a problem that is isolated to, if you like, small local municipalities, but it's also found in the big metros. So that's a new front. Like I said, that front has come much earlier than what some of us have thought. And I think that you would require a new dispensation, a regime that is bespoke to respond to those challenges that have emerged. And then the other one for Helmut, on the morale oil, I'm not using a scientific measure. Is the experience I have when I go to the power station. Like I said, the leadership stability provided by the board, the apex appointment in the form of the CEO, the inspired appointment of Mr. Ngumalo, and the appointment of general managers, you find that it has rejuvenated the mood. There's a new momentum in that space. When I do this return visit, you find that it's positive. The industrial relations significantly much better. Communication is happening. It's as a result of that relationship. It's as a result, rather, of those appointments, and they've enhanced the relationship. And we're seeing it in the performance of these power stations. Like I said, a lot of them have to do with people issues, and they exert themselves better. We're seeing the kind of results that we are seeing. And we're also seeing that the ESCOM employees are increasingly becoming defensive of this asset. As a minister, I get to be called by anonymous employees to say this and that, and then we put them in the right tray. That tray of the unit that is supporting us, the work stream that is dealing with fraud and corruption, is because of employees now. They are defending that space. They've gotten tired of those who are defrauding, who are soiling the efforts that they are making, and on their own they are coming out. We are seeing that increasingly more, and it could be as a result of people who are very proud of their space, and they can only be proud if the morale is high. That's the only conclusion I can arrive at. But I really say I don't have a scientific basis to make those kind of measurements. On the issues, Lamiz, of grid expansion, yes, you are right. I did say about a month ago, It's a ball that we have given to the National Transmission Company of South Africa, the board. I'm told they've applied their mind. I hope they'll come back. Yes, the intention was is to say that we want to announce those interventions. We wanted to announce them before the end of April. The sooner we're able to get that on what this alignment is, we're able to go out and announce to the market signal and say this is the route that we are going. And of course, there's conversations that are happening between myself and the National Transmission Company of South Africa. On the issues of the progress and key milestones, what the targets are, those are internally set. I'm sure that from a management point of view, ensuring that there's transparent performance related, if you like, measurement. That's something that is internal to the management of the team. I am really not familiar or fair with what that is, but I know that the target for the EAF for this year, I think in terms of that plan, is still 70% by 2025. They're sticking to that 70%, what the board had announced. And that's why earlier on I said we're not tampering with what the board had introduced. Of course, by the nature of every strategy, you revise, you refine as a function of obtaining conditions and circumstances. And I think that the overall thrust still remains that it must be that 75% the achievement. And what is the incentive? What is the consequence management? It's a managerial function. What we are interested in is to ensure that we are able to deliver on the promise we made to the country. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister Magam. We will once again open the floor to questions from members of the media. This will be our last round of questions. So if there are any follow-up questions, further clarity-seeking questions in the room, we are open for that, and we'll then also take questions from the online platform. I see Katleho and Hloni as well. We'll start with Katleho and Hloni. If there are any other questions, please do raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll then go to Batabile after Hloni. Yeah.
All right, Katleho from the SABC. Minister, you mentioned that there are about 7 stations that were priority stations that are trending around 60% in terms of the energy availability factor. You also said that Kgosientsho has now graduated and units are starting to perform there. Maybe give us an indication of what categorizes a priority station, and what do we mean when you say that the station is now graduating? Do you have measures that you like? Maybe based on these stations to say when it reaches these targets, it kind of give us an indication that we are now moving. Just give us a sense around Kgosientsho and those priority power stations.
Thank you, Katleho. We'll go to Hloni and then we'll go to Batabile.
Just a clarity on the numbers that we have on the forecast PNPs. I think it was 27,000 megawatts versus 31,000 for May 2020. So I just want to know, does that number the forecast number, does it take into account that the cold period that will come up? Or just like how do you measure that? And are you considering that at the moment it's still fairly warm for May? And will that does that take that into account? Sorry about that. And then my other question is, Minister, you've mentioned a few times about how what we see now is the work of the staff at Eskom, the engineers at Eskom, and you just answered my other question that we're getting calls from employees that are tired of what's been happening in the past. Is this an admission that in the past, I don't know, not to say it was sabotage, but that there were employees that were deliberately underperforming the entity for whatever reason? And then then we talk about the municipalities. Is there a chance of the new regime that will be needed to deal with the infrastructure issues? Is there an option at all for Eskom to intervene in those situations, especially given just the magnitude of skepticism that people have around what's happening? And then just final question, people do still think that because they have been negotiating so many times, that there is still negotiating in some form that is happening to them, because some of them are getting out to this school. Again, as I said, sometimes every week they're getting out to just a response to or message to South Africans who believe that there is still some form of negotiating.
Thank you, colleagues, for those questions. Batabile, do you have questions online?
Yes, I do have. I have two more questions from William Horn, representing Network 24. When last were lifestyle audits done on ESCOM managers? What were the latest findings and what interventions were subsequently made? Fourth question from William Horn is, what is the current operating margin for ESCOM's fleet? I have more questions from Chris Yella.
Batabile, can you just repeat that question and take your time?
Sorry, what is the current operating margin for ESCOM's fleet?
Okay.
I have a question from Chris Yeland, representing EEE Intelligence. Unit 2 at Cooper has been down since 10 December replacement. Close on 5 months now. What is progress on Cooper Unit 2 and when will Cooper Unit 1 go down again for a planned shutdown? Another question from Chris Yeland is the availability of consider units 1, 2, and 3 has increased significantly since the flue gas desulfurization plant was bypassed. Are you confident that the availability of consider 1, 2, and 3 will remain at the higher levels once the FGD plan is intended to service in due course? Last question from Chris is, when will ESCOM issue the RFP and FGD plant at Midway, and when will FGD plant at Midway will be operational?
Thank you, Batabile. Can you just kindly please repeat the second question from William Horn on the current operating manage?
What is the current operating margin for ESCOM's fleet?
All right. Thank you.
Yes, I have another question from Lamis Omaji, representing Muslim 4.
Okay.
Does government anticipate any legal challenges for the gas plant in Richards Bay, given the previously been legal challenges against oil and gas exploration? I have 3 questions from Terence Creamer, representing News. What procurement model will be used for the 3 gigawatt gas-fired plant in Richards Bay, and what is the status of the procurement? Given the new gas supply needs for industrial consumers, is it feasible to bring in new gas power plants when there is no visibility of gas supply? Question number 3 is, should existing gas demand not be prioritized ahead of gas to power? And last question from Terence is, how many kilometers of transmission lines have been constructed in the first 4 months of 2024? Also, another question from Helmut.
Thank you, Batabile. The questions, because this is our last round of questions. If so, we will then get to the responses. We'll start with Eric, and he'll be followed by the Minister. Thanks.
Sorry, just in terms of the peak, when you look at the winter outlook that was actually communicated on the 26th, we are still expecting the peak demand for winter to be just below 33 gigs, right? And once again, the actual planners go through the models, they look back at a lot of data over the past years, and that's how they've come up with the number. I think it's about 32,400, but it's just below 33 gigs. So that's what's the peak that's projected. In terms of the operating margin, I'm not very clear in terms of the question, but the objective for us, I mean, if you can work on roughly 47 gigs, which is the Eskom nominal capacity, our aspiration is to move towards 70% of that, which means we will have that. The aspiration for Eskom is to have that capacity available. But maybe I could, talk to William outside just so that we can get clarification on his question. Chris, in terms of Coburg Unit 2, I think as we've communicated previously, the learnings from Unit 1 are definitely being taken into the outage for Unit 2. At this stage, Unit 2, as we've communicated in the media brief on the 26th, is planned to come back on the September 2024. I think that's what I've got as a question. I'm not sure if I missed anything. In terms of the availability being experienced for Kusile 1, 2, and 3, I think for the reintegration of the permanent stack, we don't foresee any risks. I think the good news is in terms of the new, the FGD, we've secured the contract with the OEM. The actual equipment that we will be replacing with the previous inferior equipment, we're comfortable that we have much more quality equipment, especially in terms of the demisters. Most importantly is the securing of the spares, which we had as an issue. So with the new permanent stack being integrated, moving from April until to the middle of April, it's seamlessly integrated into the outage plan. And in terms of the reporting that we get on a weekly basis, no risks have been actually raised. So we actually see that availability continuing. And I think once again, I want to stress that with the appointment of Chris and his team, all efforts are being made to actually give us this positive performance at Kusile. On the FGD, Chris, I must be honest, I'll have to get the actual details in terms of that RFI, and we can always communicate that through our comms personnel. That's what I've got here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, colleagues. Katlego, to your question. So remember that at May we're sitting with that unplanned capacity loss factor of about 17,000 megawatts or so, or in fact even before that. So we then needed to see which are the stations that contributes to that number the most, and we found that 6 stations contribute to 70% of that number. So essentially of that 17,000 or so, 12,000 is as a result of 6 stations. So instead of doing all other 14 stations, said we must just be transfixed on these 6 stations. So that's really how the prioritization came. And then when I'm talking, so it is those stations that were performing badly. And then Kusile was one of those stations on account of what Eric has said, because remember those 3 units were out. So that's unplanned because we never anticipated that the FGD will fail. So Kusile then also became part of those 6 power stations that are priority power stations. Now we have delivered, the team has delivered those 3 units. Now that we have delivered the 3 units, Kusile is performing where we want it to perform. It's no more, it's taken out of that 6 priority station because now it's performing. That's what I mean by graduating. It has come out of the doldrums. It has come out of that the ranking as being one of the worst performers is now one of our best performers. Then let's focus on the others. So that's what I mean by graduating from that. And then, Hloni, maybe just to make the point, just to complete what Eric was saying in relation to your question, I think you were saying that you do expect that number on PMP to increase as we move deeper into winter colder periods. And Eric does make the point that the winter outlook says 33. And I suspect where you are then, when you look at what we are generating, if we had to look at what we are generating to be 30, it means that you are short of this 3,000 when you get to that winter. Remember, what's the number that's going to change there also is what we call your planned outages. They are sitting at 5,500 because what the team does, it knows when this peak is going to come and make sure that by that time you have as little units as possible out on planned maintenance. So the scheduling of the return of those units will coincide with the peaking on the demand side. So you're going to get it back from that planned maintenance. So what it does, essentially it negates the increases in demand or reduces the intensity of that demand. So that's what the team does. Like Eric is saying, is some degree of modeling that they've been doing over time. Yes, Lon, you are right. I think one of the issues that must be resolved at a policy level, I mean, I'm sure you know constitutionally, the responsibility for distribution sits with municipalities. And in fact, what we have here is a historic legacy where ESCOM is participating on the distribution. I'm talking at the municipal level. And of course, municipalities that can stand on their own, you know that Salga had taken ESCOM to court to say that's our space. But more and more municipalities do appreciate that. Although they want to protect that revenue space because you are distributing, but it comes with the responsibilities of maintaining that infrastructure. And a significant number of these municipalities are simply saying, no, ESCOM, can you execute this on our part? So ESCOM must do the numbers. Of course, you really don't want a situation where you are accumulating delinquents. When I say delinquents, I mean people who are receiving electricity, who can afford to pay and are not paying. And I'm separating those from the indigent. They are receiving electricity, they can't pay because they don't have the means to pay. Those ones will be catered for through a mechanism of an indigent policy. So what was the long and short of it? There has to be that policy articulation that says, how best do we intervene? And you are beginning to see it on the water side. Minister Mkhunu has come with a bespoke policy intervention, almost not taking over. It's not a hostile takeover, but essentially it's a negotiated, but in some instances, I mean, the interest of the consumer must be protected and that of the country. And yes, you are absolutely correct. I think the message that I've been conveying to consumers is that there hasn't been load shedding. So there is an orchestrated attempt by ESCOM or any other party to deny people electricity intentionally so that we are reducing the demand. I mean, if you look at those areas that are affected, they will not make a dent on what the demand is really. So and I'm saying this with the greatest of respect. In the totality of what the demand is insignificant. But it's significant in that I don't have electricity in my house. And the degree of seriousness that we attach to the resolution of that is the same that we'll attach on energy-intensive users or any other big-scale user. And that's why we're working with municipalities to ensure that we replace that infrastructure on condition that you address issues of illegal connection. On condition that those that can pay must pay, ought to pay, you install prepaid meters. And then you protect the poor, you shield them by ensuring that they do get the electricity. Of course, there's a threshold of free electricity that they're getting, that they continue to do that. And then, William, on the lifestyle audits, I'm sure it's a management question. And the board and the management, I'm sure will be in a position to respond to that. I really don't want to enter into a space that doesn't belong to me. I think we have developed that rapport with ESCOM. I'll sit and remain in my lane. I'll be that disciplined. Lamiz, yes, I always make the point that the default approach, when you enter into procurement of nuclear, procurement of gas, the default approach is that prepare yourself to be taken to court. So essentially do extraordinary measures to ensure that you protect yourself against any form of litigation. It's almost like a given. And of course, people have the right to oppose, protect the environment, ecological and the like. It's fine. So I was saying to the team that they just make that assumption that you'll be taken to court. Like is the case on major procurement events in this country. Almost all of them end up in court. And then Terence, no, part of that joint technical team is to resolve the questions that you are raising, the procurement model and also the fuel source. You are absolutely right. And Minister Mantashe has admitted this, and measures to address this, the issues of gas poverty in the next 2 years or so. So it's not the intention that we exclude or neglect the current users in favor of gas to power. We think that there's space for both, but principally you must resolve the issue of the molecule. So you're absolutely correct. It's part of the totality of those engagement terrains to ensure that we were able to address these issues. Helmut, on what is the total kilometers that have been rolled out? Now I really don't have that number. I really want your indulgence. We will share that with you through a different platform, and then in the next briefing, I'll share with everyone what that number is. Let me take the opportunity to thank everyone for making time, always joining us, and want to say to the rest of the country, the ESCOM team will continue to, and of course, government as a whole, because we're also making intervention on the new generation, the rollout of PV, which is outside the ESCOM domain. And that's why this briefing really is beyond ESCOM, is the totality of the intervention on the back of the Energy Action Plan. We do commit that we'll do everything possible to resolve this challenge and ultimately put this behind us.